Good everyone. I was just having a discussion with Johan right before the talk, and I said to him the interesting thing about soil is that if you walk onto the farm here, these trees are just growing wherever they are. So, what's the big idea now about looking for different things to add to the soil and to put a specific kind of soil into your bowl? Because trees just grow in everything. If you go to the Northern Cape, they grow in sand. If you go to the sea, they're growing in sand. Um, and a lot of places, the ground is a lot more fertile than in other areas. But this is the thing. The moment that I start restricting a tree by putting it into a bowl or into a bonsai dish, now I'm starting to restrict the roots, and the difference that comes in suddenly is between my tree surviving on the one hand and my tree thriving on the other hand. All right. So just to have it survive, you can pretty much stick any soil in a pot and it might grow. But we're going to look at the purpose of what the soil needs to be doing for the tree. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about different ingredients. So some of you guys have had a walkabout, and some of you have looked at some of the ingredients that I have here, and we'll send it around later on. You can study them a bit more closely. But before I start, I have a question, and the question is this: over here, I've got a small. This actually came off a cutting. It's just a little speck bloom that I brought along, and then this tree I just got from Hannes. He said I'm not allowed to take it home though. All right. So the question is, if I'm going to be repotting these two trees, are they going to go into exactly the same soil mix? Okay, but why not? Okay, they could. But if you do take the decision to not put them in the same soil mix, why?
Water requirements.
Water requirements. Okay, good. So the theme of the year is progression. And obviously, this tree is much further along progression-wise as what this would be. So it's actually going to come down to the purpose of what I'm trying to achieve with the tree. I would, for instance, want this tree to be growing a lot faster than something like this, because this is at a much more refined state where I'm going to be I would be very happy with this tree. Hannes still has a bit to do to it, but I would be more than happy with it just the way it is. Right. So, interesting story. A couple of years ago, it was probably about 2017, the very first bonsai workshop that I ever went to. And the talk on that day was about soil mixes. And it ended up with two very respected club members almost coming to blows. These guys almost grabbed each other physically and started beating each other because they were arguing about what is the perfect soil mix, what do I have to put into the pot to make the tree grow better. And if you came here today and you ordered some of Stefan's mix, I'm not going to say it's not the perfect mix, but what I rather want, the way that I would like you to look at soil mixes when you go away from here, is not to ask the question that I asked on that day, what is the perfect soil mix or what is the perfect recipe, but rather to ask, what am I trying to achieve with the soil that I'm putting into the pot? And that's where your different ingredients are going to come in, because each one of them has a different purpose. Okay. All right. So let's get started. What is the most important part of the tree, do you think? If you look at this tree, what part of the tree do you think is important? It might not be the right question or the right wording for the question, but the roots. I'm happy that you're giving me that answer, because when we look at a tree, obviously the part that we see is the part above ground. We see the leaves, we see the branches, we see the trunk, but we don't see what's going on underneath the soil. And that is actually where the health and the development of your tree starts, because if you have unhealthy roots, your tree's going to die, and you're not even going to know why. You're not even going to know your tree's dying. You're just going to see something's going wrong, but you're not going to know exactly what's going wrong. And we often hear things like, what kills the most trees? Then some of us might say not enough water, or some might say too much water. And it's actually not really too much water that's killing your tree. It's more not enough air than it is too much water, because yes, your roots also need to breathe. So that's another problem as well. Okay, so if we have unhealthy roots, then nothing above the soil is actually even going to matter, because we've started on a path to disaster if we have unhealthy roots. Okay, so why do we need soil? What is the purpose of the soil in our bonsai pot? Because if we look at this tree, there's basically three parts. There's the tree, there's the pot, and there's the soil. What would you say would be the purpose of the soil? Anybody? There's quite a few. Nutrients? To keep the tree in the pot. Okay, good, fantastic. The first one is exactly that, keeping the tree in the pot. Now, technically, I could take a bowl like this and fill it up with marbles, and I could stick a tree in there, and that might give me fantastic drainage, but is the tree going to grow in there? I don't think so. Most probably not. Right. So the first thing that the soil needs to do for the tree is to stabilize the tree, to keep the tree in the pot. It needs somewhere to grow. It needs something for the roots to grow in. Sounds obvious, but that is the first one. Obviously, we use wire and whatnot to stabilize your tree in the pot sometimes, but we need to put soil in there to keep the tree in the pot. So the first purpose is to stabilize the tree. The second one is obviously that soil stores water, right? So that's where a big part of our progression comes in, because once it gets to watering, no two soils are equal. Some of them are going to hold a lot more water for a lot longer. Some of them are going to get rid of the water that's in the soil and dry out a lot quicker. All right. So if you think about a sponge stays wet, but if you press it, the water comes out. And your tree needs water to be healthy. So we need our tree to receive also water, which comes from obviously the soil. And now we have two variables. If your soil becomes too dry all the time, you're going to have a problem. If your soil is too wet all the time, you're also going to have a problem. So that's drainage. So we're going to talk about drainage just now. Then the third thing that we often don't think about is that your soil also needs to provide your tree with oxygen. Your roots needs oxygen. So we need spaces in between the soil particles for air to come in so that your roots can breathe. So we can't have a soil that's too compacted, because then your roots are not going to breathe. And lack of oxygen obviously kills trees. Okay. And then the other one, I think you mentioned it, the soil stores nutrients. Now, I want you to think about this quickly. When you are at home and you're going to prepare a meal, there's two rooms involved. There's the kitchen where the meal is actually being made, and then you've got either a pantry or a storeroom or a kitchen cupboard where the food is being stored. And we tend to think about the soil like a kitchen, but it's not. It's more like the pantry. It's holding the nutrients, but the roots still need to get hold of those nutrients, and that's where all the other variables come in, like we've just discussed, your oxygen and your watering. Okay. So it doesn't help that we just have a bunch of nutrients in the soil. We actually need the roots to be healthy so that they can get hold of the nutrients. Okay. And some of these ingredients that we have here don't actually even hold any nutrients. nutrients. So we need to think about that as well. But we're going to get to that in a moment. Okay, so our soil creates, or should create, hopefully, a healthy home for your roots to stay in. And that is where the health of your tree starts, because healthy roots are going to produce a healthy tree with healthy branches and healthy leaves, and everything's going to be healthy. But if we don't start looking after the roots first, then we're going to have a problem. Another thing that your soil actually also does is it helps regulate the temperature of the tree, especially where we live, where it's hot. And you have especially shallow pots sometimes. So that affects the amount of soil that we have. So the amount of soil is actually also going to contribute to how fast your roots are going to heat up or dry out, or maybe even freeze. Okay, so that's quite an important one as well. If you place this shallow container out in the sun, it's going to dry up and it's going to get quite hot quite quickly. So the amount of soil and sometimes the mix of the soil as well. If you're going to use a majority of stone in your soil, it's going to heat up a lot quicker. So if I have to summarize that first part, it's actually all about balance. Your soil should be balanced. Balance is the most important thing, because your soil manages and balances many things. It should hold water, but just enough water, not too much water. It needs to balance that without being waterlogged. It needs to provide oxygen without drying out too quickly. It needs to store nutrients, but it also needs not to become compacted. Okay, so we need a balance. What makes bonsai soil then different to anything else that we could dig up here, throw it in the pot, and just use normal garden soil? This is a mix of that I just got from Stefan this morning. There's quite a lot of things in there. We'll talk about that in a moment. Garden soil works perfectly if you're planting something in the garden. But in a shallow bonsai pot, not as much, because we have all the factors that we just spoke about now. And your soil now in the pot is being built from specific particles, okay? So now we have a whole bunch of variables, like you said earlier, Johan, that starts playing into what am I actually going to put in the pot. Because the first thing, the most obvious one, I would suppose, would be the type of tree. I wouldn't be using maybe the same soil mix for an acacia as I would be using for a swamp cypress, for instance. Okay. And each one of these ingredients behave in a different manner. So we need to look at what are these components actually doing. So if we start looking at the components, each one of them has a different job. And I've got quite a few of them over here. The first one that I have here is just plain stone chips, right? That's just crushed stone. And this is fantastic if you're looking for weight. If you're wanting to stabilize a bigger tree into a pot, or you need to make your soil heavier, that's fantastic. And it's also going to help your drainage quite a lot. But this is not going to hold any nutrients. Okay. Something else that I have here is silica sand. I used to use this. I've actually stopped using it completely because it gets too compacted. It just go and try and get a tree out of a pot that's been planted with that stuff in there for 2 years. It just totally compacts and it gets dry and hard, and Yes, exactly. Yeah, the Geowadana said they for koi dam filters and they should go in there. That's their purpose. Okay. Then this is something else. This is called Sakadama. This is not to be confused with Akadama, which is the actual Japanese product. And Akadama is not used, and it's not good because it comes from Japan. It's used and it's good for what it actually does. Okay. I'm going to get to that in a moment. Yeah, Akadama, which we use for a very good reason, because it absorbs water, it holds nutrients well, and because it's quite porous, it encourages your fine feeder roots, and it actually takes many years to break down. It doesn't break down rapidly, so it lasts quite a long time. Now, the Sakadama, we're still all getting used to it. We haven't really been using it for that long. I don't know if there's anybody that has been using Sakadama for quite a while. And I think it's relatively good. I think it's not bad. It's quite good. Yeah, a little bit. Maybe if you if you're worried about your budget, it might be a bit on the expensive side, but it's quite a good product. The other fantastic one, of course, is Lekker, which is very light. This stuff it's light. It's like polystyrene almost. It's very, very light. You're welcome to come and have a few. This has actually become quite a staple, and I think it's very, what's the word? Very popular at the moment. Yeah, I think a lot of you guys probably are using Lekker. I think one of the main advantages of Lekker is that it is light, actually, because if you obviously have bigger trees, then it becomes quite a mission to lug them around. So the Lekker helps with that quite a bit. It also stores quite a bit of water, and it's very porous. So that's good for roots, for developing finer roots as well. Something else that Hannes actually showed me, this is a mix of actual Akadama and pumice. So pumice is like a sponge made out of stone. It's like a sponge stone. It absorbs water. It's very, very, very porous, and it's got a lot of air. So it keeps a lot of air around. So that's actually fantastic for your roots. So this is a mix of Akadama, pumice, and I think he said there's something else in here as well. Hannes, wat is nog hierin? Pumice, Akadama, and Lekker. So this is a fantastic mix, but very expensive. So what Lekker actually is, it's clay that's baked. It's rolled into a little ball and it's baked. And this stuff lasts very, very long. It doesn't break down. I've had some of this in pots for probably about 6 years, and you take it out and it's still exactly in the same condition as it was. Excellent drainage, excellent airflow, and it's very, very light. Yeah, this doesn't weigh even half of what that, or this almost weighs the same as that amount of stone. Okay, so the point of what I'm trying to convey to you guys today is that I would rather have you going away here and thinking about the different ingredients and what they do and how that is going to affect mixing my soil at home, rather than thinking Dolph or Stefan or Hannes needs to now give me a recipe that I'm going to use, and this recipe is going to work for all my trees. That's not going to happen. Omeni mentioned and keeps mentioning it when we get to these subjects, that in my own garden, the microclimate changes. If I'm on the street side of my house, or if I'm at the back side of my house, and I keep the same tree in the same pot at the same distance from the ground, it's going to be two completely different climates for that tree to grow in. The last one that I didn't talk about, I did actually talk about sand. There's some silica sand, terrible stuff, unless you want to use it for a fish tank filter. This one is actually just plain compost, which is your organic part of your mix. When I spoke to Hannes earlier, he suggested that if you're making big batches of soil, you can just stick one spade or a couple of hands full of garden soil in there just to bring in some microbes. And then this is another one that I particularly enjoy as well, is perlite. Even lighter than lekker, but it does have one sort of drawback. If you're mixing it and it gets water, it tends to float on top. So that's a bit of a problem. So you need to cover it with some kind of a layer of gravel on top or something so that all the perlite doesn't wash out. But that's also very, very good for drainage, and it does hold a lot of water as well. So when you come up just now and you have a look, there's some cocoa peat here as well. This stuff actually is amazing holding water. Water retention, quite very, very good. So yeah, there's quite a few different ones here. I thought of just showing you guys quickly. This, yes. Good for? Fire. Okay. Thank you. For figs. Yeah. Cocoa peat. Yeah. You get it in bags, but you also get it in blocks. And you throw the block into a bucket and you fill it up with water, and yeah. Yes, yeah, it's not very heavy. Okay, so this is pure lekker, right? If I pour some water on here, you'll see that the water is basically going straight through, right to the bottom. Okay, so it's not really holding that much of the water. Fantastic for drainage. Although if you go and look at these particles now, they're actually quite wet. So they're gonna retain water for quite a while there. They're porous, yeah. So they're keeping a lot of water, but the drainage is very fast. Okay. This is the Suikerbos. So let's look at that. Let's see what the drainage is like here. Water's going straight through. Huh? So another one with good drainage. And then this one is just plain compost. So let's see what that does. And suddenly the water's not coming through quite as quickly. So that's holding your water back a little bit. So according to, depending on what sort of ratios you're going to be using, that's going to affect your water drainage right there. So back to the question, what is the best soil to use? Or why is everyone's soil mix different? And if I think about the two gentlemen that I mentioned in the beginning, you would think that most probably either one of them would have been wrong, but I don't think they were. I think both of them were right. They were just growing different trees in a different environment, and another important one also being grown by a different person. Because if we have the exact, well, you'll never have two exact same trees, but if we have two trees of the same species, same age, more or less the same size, in more or less the same pots, and I put one in your garden and one in my garden, and you're looking after the one and I'm looking after the other one, but there's no other variables, there's going to be a variable, because I might be leaving to work at 6 in the morning and come back at 6 at night, and you might be at home being able to water your tree 2 or 3 times a day. So that's going to also affect the decisions that I'm making here, because if I'm not going to be around to water all the time, I'm going to have to make sure that the soil is retaining moisture. If I'm going to be at home, I can have a more free draining soil mix. Okay. So the question then that actually begs to be asked is not what is the best soil, but the best soil for what? Okay? What do I mean? The best soil for what I'm trying to achieve. The best soil for this would be something that's going to make it grow as quickly as possible. I'm not going to want to restrict this in any way. I'm going to want this to grow as quickly as possible. And this, my soil mixture is going to look completely different because I'm trying to achieve something completely different. I want a lot of porous roots, and I don't want it to grow as vigorously. So if I can contain the growth a little bit, that's going to be good as well. So what am I trying to achieve with the tree? And the actual stage of progression that the tree is in is going to have a tremendous effect on my soil mix. Like I mentioned earlier, we tend to keep trees in shallow pots. I know some trees are in deeper containers, but if we're specifically talking about shallow pots tend to dry out quickly, heat up very quickly. So once we're looking at soil mixtures, we need to take into account a lot of variables. Climate matters. Species is going to matter. Your watering habits is going to matter. Like I just mentioned, am I at home, am I not at home? These are going to have impact. The stage of development of the tree. And for that reason, there simply cannot be one recipe that I'm going to use for everything. This year's theme, like I've already mentioned, is progression. So the link here is that I need to look at the needs of the tree specifically, and also at what stage of progression the tree is in. So now I'm going to stop just copying recipes, and it's good to start with a basic recipe. You could start with something like a 50-50 stone and compost mix, and then you can tweak it from there. You have to start somewhere. But we tend to think about refining our trees in the sense of pruning the branches, wiring, carving. But I want to suggest to you today that refining your tree and the progression of your tree actually starts below the soil. The soil mix and what we actually putting in our pots is a lot more important than what we sometimes realize, because we tend to think about logically about the parts of the tree that we can see, and we tend to not focus as much on what's going on actually inside the pot. So, to answer the question, what is the best soil? The best soil is the one that works best for your situation and for your tree. That provides a environment for your tree where it will not only survive, but where it will actually thrive and actually grow to the best of its potential and ability. So if you take just one thing from this talk today, I would like it to be that what we actually need to work towards is not to memorize recipes, but to rather understand the principles behind what constitutes a good soil mix, and to go and try and apply that for yourself at home. And that's my story about soil mixes. Okay, so now we have a second part, and I hope this is not going to get too close to what Len is going to be talking about next month, but preparing for repotting, because Len is going to talk about repotting, but now before I'm going to even think about starting to repot, I'm going to have to prepare myself and my work area and my tree to be repotted. Okay, so one of the most important things when we're preparing for repotting is actually to get your work area ready. If you guys look at, this is just a small little setup. I'm sure there's quite a lot more things that could that you could add to this. But if you look at the setup, do you think I have most of the things at least that I would need to be able to repot a tree?
What do we need to repot a tree?
What do we need to repot a tree? That's a good question. The very first thing that you're going to notice, there's no pot. Thanks, Stefan. There's no pot. Right. And the other thing that I also omitted is there's no drainage cover. Okay. So now imagine I've pulled my tree out of the pot. The roots are open. I've got it on here. And now suddenly I realize I don't have any drainage mesh. I don't have anything to cover the drainage holes with. Now I'm running to the garage. I'm looking for something to cut a piece of this off. And my tree's standing here with exposed roots and it's drying out. So it's very important to make sure that you have everything that you're going to need together before you even start. Before you even bring the tree here to be repotted. Have everything ready. Have your tools ready. Have your tools cleaned. Have a root rake. Have something to cut the bigger roots with. Have some wire to secure your pot into your tree into the pot, sorry. And you could probably scoop your soil with anything. You could use your hand, you could use anything. I've just got one of these that tends to work quite well. It works quite well. And then another important tool when you're preparing for repotting is your chopsticks. But I'm not going to get into any of that because Len is going to be talking about that. So what I want to mention today is I've prepared a workstation now, and I'm preparing to repot a tree. And now I'm going to repot this tree because it's spring. And in spring, I have to repot my trees. So now I'm going to repot this tree because it's now August, and that's what I have to do. Is that a good idea? No. I need to determine why am I taking the decision to repot this tree or not repot. Okay? So there's a couple of telltale signs. If I pick the pot up and there's roots coming out the bottom of the pot, it's probably a good time to repot the tree. Okay? Probably a good idea. Or you have roots growing at the top and all around the whole pot. The whole pot is filled up with roots. That would be a good time to repot the tree. But then what would also give you an indication that it's time to repot the tree? Anything else that any of you guys could think of?
Growing tips.
Okay, all right. How about watering? If I'm watering this tree and the water's running out the side and there's nothing coming out the bottom holes, do you think it's time to repot the tree? I would say so, because no water is penetrating the soil. If I have poor drainage, so the whole bowl is filling up with water, but there's no water coming out the bottom and it's becoming a soggy, muddy mess, a good time to repot your tree. Also things like, is my pot too small for the tree? Is my pot too big for the tree? Do I want to get it into maybe a smaller pot? Maybe the development stage of this tree has now changed. I've been growing this in a plastic container for 5 years, and I've now achieved some of what I want to do, and it's now time to transplant it into a better looking pot. All of those are going to make the decision about whether I'm going to repot the tree or not, rather than just the date. So the question is not, is it spring? Should I now repot the tree? Is the tree at a place where it needs to be repotted? And then if I'm repotting the tree, what is the purpose of repotting the tree? It could be different things. It could be, what am I trying to achieve by sticking this tree into another pot? Am I trying to improve the root health? Am I trying to replace old soil? Am I going to be reducing the root ball? Am I moving it from maybe a training pot to a actual bonsai pot? Am I maybe changing the planting angle? Am I going to be doing some root work? Am I going to be improving the nabari? Am I maybe going to be changing the front of the tree? Maybe the tree's in the pot I want it in, but I want to change the front, change the planting angle. So there needs to be a reason for me to repot, not just I'm going to repot because it's August, because it's now time to repot and that's what I have to do now. There needs to be a purpose. And then another important one is actually making sure that you pick the right day. I'm not talking about the right calendar day, but if I'm going to be repotting a tree in a very shallow pot on a day when it's 34 degrees outside and I'm in the sun, that might not be the best idea. If it's a very windy day and I'm working outside and there's no shelter from the wind, that might not be the best day. If there's a 90% chance for heavy rain and I'm not working under a roof, that might not be the best day to do repotting. So all of these are things that we need to, it sounds logical, but all of these are things that we need to bring into consideration. Or if it's going to be freezing cold, exactly. So now we have two concepts that we've talked about. We've talked about preparing, getting everything ready, and then also the decision why we are going to be repotting the tree. So, like I explained earlier, if you have to stop halfway to now go and fetch something that you've forgotten, your trees are drying out. So, preparation is actually going to be protecting your tree. And then this is where the other part comes in as well, preparing your soil. I'm not going to bare root this tree and then put it over here and then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take 3 spoonsful of sakadama and 1 cup full of compost and now I'm going to mix that for the... Have your soil mix already mixed before you take the tree out the pot? Make sure the mesh is installed. Make sure your tie-down wires are already fitted. Make sure your pot is cleaned. Drainage holes are open. Everything's front of the pot is set. Everything's ready before you get your tree out of the pot. I almost want to say that preparing the tree to be repotted is something that's going to start not even on the day. It's going to start days before, maybe even weeks before, while I'm walking through, watering my tree, removing weeds. Then I'm looking at the tree, I'm deciding what the front is going to be, I'm studying the tree. I'm asking myself, is this angle still going to work? Is there something I want to change? And with all of that in mind, I'm now bringing the tree to the workstation so that I can do the repotting as quickly and as successfully as possible. And then...
Sorry, what are your thoughts about drying out the tree for 2 or 3 days before you transplant? Is there a different schools of thought?
I would say most probably that would be a bit more species specific, I think. I don't think you'd want to do that with a tea bush, but it might work very... no, but it might work very well with an acacia. So I think that would be one of the things where your own microclimate and your own level of expertise or your experience, your ondervinding, that's going to play a big role there.
Because often a lot of books say that. I never do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that one is highly discussable. I've also not really done that too often. So when you're preparing yourself, even now you've prepared your workstation, you've prepared your tree, but make sure that you're not rushing. Make sure that you're not planning on repotting 200 trees this morning and you have an important appointment at the doctor's office this afternoon. You're not gonna get finished. You're not gonna get finished. I've actually got 2 handouts here. The first one I made quite a few of, so you can pass these around. This is like a little preparing for repotting checklist with some tools and with the reasons that we asked also why we're going to be repotting the tree. So you guys can look at that. And then I've just got a few of these if anyone's interested. This is like something that I've used for many years that just indicates sort of more or less which month of the year is a good time to repot specific species, although do not follow this too rigorously because your climate at your house is different. This is just, yeah, you can leave these over here. This is just a guideline. Don't, I can put that on the WhatsApp group. Please don't go and repot your olive in July, and if it dies, then you phone me and say, you said I must repot my olive in July and now it's dead. This is just a guideline. Okay, so progression at the end of the day has got nothing to do with buying more expensive soil or buying better tools. It's about making better decisions for the health of my tree. It's also not about getting more and more and more trees, because when we start at the beginning, we think, we just need to get more trees and more trees and more trees. Yeah, so I've got that problem because I've been trying to explain to my wife that I'm not a hoarder. People that rescue animals are called rescuers. So I rescue plants from the nursery and give them a safe home. Exactly. Okay, so the most important thing, and I think this needs to tie into where Len is going to start next week, before you get around to, or next month rather, before we get around to the repotting and to all the bits and pieces that Len is going to be explaining and showing us on a practical level how to do it, make sure that everything is prepared. Make sure your tools are clean. Make sure your tools are sharp. Make sure you have everything on hand when you're ready, and make sure your soil is already mixed, and make sure that you have an actual reason for repotting your tree. That's a better reason than just it's now August or it's now September and we need to do it for a specific reason, and you need to have a plan when you're doing it. And you can skip a few years if you have to, yeah. So if there's anybody that wants to take some of these, you're welcome. You can have a look at the ingredients here, and yeah, that's it from me.